All right, Bannock County Commissioners are back in session. This fiscal year 2025 budget recap.
Mr. Chair, before we get started, just a point of meeting. I may need to stand up from time to time to stretch my legs, so if I stand up, just bear with me for a minute.
You're not frustrated? Ready
No,
to
it is just relieving pain in another area, so.
Okay, I have a summary sheet which I can provide to Christie if somehow she wants to do a late add to the packet for public. I just didn't get this put together until this morning.
Okay.
If we want to maybe start on the back side, we can talk operating first. It's a little bit easier, and then we can go to salaries and then potential executive session after that to clarify some things. So for basic budget discussion topics, we separated out the clothing allowance this year. After doing that and listening to some of the departments, I think for law enforcement, we keep in that line as uniforms, but for like road and bridge, noxious weed, mosquito, those are kind of more safety items. So it might be worth moving those back into the safety line from the uniform line, just simply because it clarifies that the need. It's a little more transparent in that aspect. And then I don't know if we want to have any other discussion on
But on that one, I kind of like that we separated it, just so it give us a point of discussion.
Yep.
Because I think that we need to still put the criterias and say, okay, if it is safety, this is the criteria and this is the reasoning behind it.
So you mean you agree with Christie of keeping them separated, uniforms versus safety equipment? You're agreeing with that?
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, that was the solution that we had come up with when we had talked about this the other day, that it's a little more transparent and a little more clear to the department that this is safety gear and this is a uniform and what the difference is.
And then it became a little more apparent, all the departments that are just providing shirts for their rational reasons, which may or may not coincide with
And that's
commission
policy.
and
I think we
clerks.
need to
Yeah.
set a policy a little
So,
better.
yeah.
Yep, that's what we thought.
The next item I think we need to talk about is Historical Society asked for $44,000 more just for operations. That's a 49% increase. That's a lot if we're trying to maintain tax dollars.
Yep.
No. That's just where I'm at.
Let them raise their fees for coming in or whatever.
They've got a new director. Let's get a little proof here of what's going on and see what's happening. That's my feelings.
Okay. The other item that stood out was ambulance wanting to use $400,000 of reserve dollars to start the funding for South County. Hopefully, the point that I was trying to make is we can't use reserves for one-time operations. It's not going to increase revenue. We're still going to respond to the calls, so billings aren't going to miraculously increase. If you wanted to try one-time monies, but then once you've obligated staff for South County staffing purposes, we can't guarantee it for 26.
Mr. Chair, on this line item, I would like to maybe hold off on a discussion on that for a week or two. Chris and I are working on some things with the ambulance contract going forward that would impact this discussion, and I think until we have more clear discussion or direction, unless it causes us a lot of stress to hold off on this for a couple weeks, I would ask that we do that.
The only item on that is clerk's recommendation is due July 11th.
I like November.
That won't work for, operations, but July 11th. So
My
what-
feeling on this is we don't know where we're at yet. The building's still being built and stuff. And I wouldn't mind, I think we need to know a little further, when's it gonna be available, how can we house it, I think we need more information on it.
Yeah. And
Before committing.
And that suggestion of using reserves, we just can't do that. I mean, that's a setup for failure. We just can't, you can't use one-time money for ongoing expenses.
Correct.
It's a bad idea. So,
We can work through this, to your point, we can work through this through the clerk's recommendation to provide a balanced budget, but then also continue the conversation based on what we're working on over the next few weeks, through the clerk's, or commission proposed. Will that
Okay.
work?
Yeah, if
So
that
it'll
works
just
for
be
you,
evolving.
I just wanted a bookmark here that
Yep,
this is in flux for a couple of reasons.
yep.
and that's perfect. If we have the information before we do the clerk's recommendation, then
Throw it in.
we can throw that in, but if we don't, it'll just continue to evolve.
Okay.
What's the timeline on that building looking like? Have you heard?
I have not heard, but I was thinking they would be done by spring, but I have not heard to confirm that.
Do you want me to email Carlene? Because I mean, I need that for ARPA.
Yeah.
We have,
I'll text Aaron right now. See if he'll answer.
he's gonna be here at 1 o'clock.
Oh.
He's the first one on our
Oh, is he?
BOE.
Well, before your BOE starts, hit him up on it, and then
Yeah.
let me know, please. Okay, and this is just another reiteration. I need to look and see where we're at with indigent. We might need to do some shuffling around with those dollars. We do get reimbursement monies that might continue to fund the the non-medical side, but we might need to move Chantel, we might need to move the rent, until we start working through the clerk's recommendation, and even possibly after the clerk's recommendation, as more information comes in, we might need to adjust that throughout the process. So, I mentioned that, but I just want that very clear. So I tried to go through and outline most of the projects, just to see what the feel for the board was, so that as we do the clerk's recommendation, we can all try to come together and have less adjustments. So the countywide fleet vehicles, that's going to be about $894,000. That's going to be broken out into all the different departments. And I think the consensus was to allow that. Those will be reserve dollars. So it shouldn't impact, and I should have, in hindsight, I should have done an asterisk or something so that you knew what was going to be reserves and what would be ongoing.
I got a pen.
Could you just hit the ones that, real quick, that you've are identified for reserves? Yeah.
Okay. The corner building would be reserves. Maintenance, the UTV. The 2 road and bridge items, the truck plow and the snow blower. The ambulance equipment, both of those. Do I miss one in there? Oh, that one's not. The district courtroom remodel, some of that's going to be rolled forward. The historical space saver, the noxious weed truck. Oh, sorry, the event center snowplow, missed that one. The scale house, and PILT we always treat like one time.
So the 4 million for the scale house, that's all reserves?
That would have to be reserves. Because,
And
well, it's
would-
one time.
Would we break that up over 2 years, or are you trying to take that all in one shot?
Some of that's budgeted this year. 2.5
Right.
million is this year. They anticipate
Right.
spending about 500,000 this year, so we would roll 2 million over. The other thing on this one that we need to do is we need to look at what our reserves are and make sure we have that within mediation and groundwater, expansion, those items. Make sure we're going to have plenty.
So just to make sure I'm thinking correctly, when we set aside reserve dollars, the budget may go up, but that does not have a tax impact because we've already
Correct.
collected those funds. We're just using saved dollars.
Yes,
That's right.
correct.
Okay.
So that leaves the, and really on the county operations line, that education, that 20,000, we just need a clarification on how you wanted to label that. Do we want to put that,
Braden and you talked about it. What'd you say?
but.
And he come down and he says, this is what Christie and I decided, and I like the
Did I
terms.
tell you that? See, I didn't write it down, but I told Caitlin when I walked by her.
Let's see if I put it in here or if I put it in a sticky note on my desk.
Somehow it was going to be countywide. Gosh, now I can't remember.
And this
I
was
was sitting
like
there.
for
Leadership training.
leadership
things like that.
training and stuff
Right.
like that. And
We just wanted to earmark it as countywide, right?
Yes.
And then after budget's approved, assuming this makes it through the whole process, then maybe you guys could just do a meeting with all elected officials and let them know that money is there and for what they could use it for.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see if we can remember what that cool term was.
Yeah, you guys had a term that sounded really good.
Caitlin's got it on her
This is
desk.
what
Gonna
happens
post it.
when I don't,
Staff development.
Yeah.
there we go.
Right on
Staff
the
development.
Staff development.
Yep.
Does that work?
Yep.
Countywide staff development. Thank you.
And then Emma had a few projects that she wanted to utilize $13,500 for, and I just wanted to see if these dollars would, there's pros and cons to it being in county operations under Emma's budget, is that it could be used this year for this, and then next year it could be used for something else, or some of the same uses. So probably like the recruitment brochures, those would probably be a continuous thing. It might vary by departments of who's struggling with hiring. The other benefit of putting it in the department budget is it allows the department some insured input and buy-in. So I just wanted to put that as a discussion. Either way, it's going to be property tax dollars, most likely.
My initial thought on that is, well, I vacillated, but my initial thought is give each department the budget so you can track it, but then that limits our flexibility with it a little bit. So if we have something come up that we need to use more PIO funds for, that would make it more challenging. So I'm kind of leaning towards just putting it in the general fund or in the PIO budget.
Okay.
And after yesterday, I don't know if you saw the stuff that went out. Tony called Emma because they had the search and rescue go out for the body.
Oh,
And they had Emma go out and take pictures and do different things. And so I think that putting it under hers or under
okay.
for right now, let's get everybody used to how to use it.
Okay.
And if we need to have some.
Because she does serve the county as a whole. So
Yes. Yeah.
I just think it gives us flexibility if we have something come up.
And I'm
Yeah, I don't care.
Well,
This was-
like I said, just after yesterday and watching how that transpired, Tony says this would be a good opportunity for you to help search and rescue, which
Mhm.
we wouldn't put it in search and rescue's budget or something of this nature.
right.
Where if it's in Emma's and countywide, we can utilize it,
Okay.
even though we could have maybe pulled that out of the sheriff. But
Sure.
I think we need to utilize her and realize how to utilize her.
That's perfect. I wanted it, it's still fairly new, and her operations are kind of evolving on how she does and what she does, so I just,
Yeah.
discussion only.
So
Okay.
while we're talking about that real quick, and I don't remember listening, but like for elections, does elections have a PR budget?
No, we use our money that we would use for our,
Election expense.
for publications and notices and things like that,
Mhm.
kind of that same line, but we don't have, like, our election expenses like Christy's talking about, that's where
That's a catch-all.
that's kind of the catch-all for ballot information and different things like that, but yeah,
Okay.
we don't have a huge cost there.
Yeah. And I was just going back to my earlier thing, of I like having the departments responsible for some part of their marketing budget
Yeah.
to manage. And
We
so-
are gonna have one right now, Julie and I are working on a voter registration drive that between now and the presidential election, we're just to remind people to go and get registered.
Yeah.
Because they've been dropped off if they've moved or if they have not voted since the last presidential election, then their voter registration has been purged.
Right.
So,
Okay, that was just a thought I had just right now as we're talking about marketing and things like that.
yeah.
And she's got some other regular marketing monies.
Correct.
These were just specific for those
Okay.
purposes, so,
That's my deals with it, so.
yeah. Okay. Special projects, $120,000, that's gonna be recurring, as long as there's projects that need done for maintenance. I mean, we've got old buildings, so there's always gonna be a little bit of something.
No, Dan needs that. I mean, he needs to be able to just like I said, the city of Income's out of water today.
Mm-hmm.
Water line broke.
Yeah, things come
How
up.
do you budget for it?
Yeah. Fair has $14,000 in their office budget that was budgeted this year for a spring and a fall event. They've not done anything,
And I'm gonna have a discussion with them,
okay,
and I need to get Brian involved with this. They are responsible for the fair and the week of the fair.
mhm,
All the other activities that they're wanting to have and do down there shouldn't go through them, it should come through the commission.
okay.
And so, we need to,
So for now, do you want us to leave that in there and then facilitate how that would work, and they
Would
can
it-
run
would
that
it
through
come to the
Scott?
commission, or would it go through Scott?
Well, it'll go through Scott, but.
well, it
contracts
depends what
will
it
go through
is.
you.
If it's, just like I was down at the fair board meeting last week, and they was wanting to do their fees.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, fees come through us,
Mm-hmm.
not them. And they were trying. Spent a lot of time, talking about that. But if there's any breaks in any contracts, anything that isn't fair related, should come through us, through Scott,
Right.
through us, and through Jamie. I mean, we gotta coordinate better, Jamie and Alex, and who they report to, and so to say that this is fair, I don't.
It does not belong
I
in fair.
think it's the Downey Event Center,
Well, and that's,
fairgrounds that are responsible,
Yes.
the responsibility of the commission.
and right now, we have it in the fair office budget, not the week fair budget, which,
Do we need to set up a line item for like fair events?
That's how
Or
it's- that's-
fairground events?
that's how it's,
that
that's
is
how
how-
it's earmarked, yeah.
Through
I
fair
just-
office, not fair
Right.
maintenance, or not
Yeah.
through fair.
It's just it's in that
Event.
department, it's in the fair office department, but it has its own line item, and it's, I'll get the exact wording, but it's specified that it's just an
Okay.
event. And part of the reason I bring that up is because they also requested $15,000 increase for entertainment for 1 week. So that's labeled under just events. We have an events line that 14 is in. So I just,
So this is 100,000 plus 15?
no, it was 85,000
okay.
this year. So, but between those two items, that's an extra, 29,000 that if we have other needs versus wants, I just kind of wanted it to be a discussion topic, or at least on your radar of, and we don't have to make a decision right
And I,
now, but.
honestly, I'd take that 15,000 out of there right now. Just simply, they told us they're charging every night for events now. So let's see what money they have, and if they go over their budget, I mean, then we have the opportunity to open the budget, right? If they make revenues in all these events.
Here's the
It's-
hard thing with their department is they don't have the revenue until the first week of August.
Yeah.
They've already spent the budget, so they won't have the abilities to spend more money on entertainment. So in an ideal world, I'd know what money they brought in August, and then we could say, okay, you've got a couple of years of bringing in some decent money. Yes, that justifies the 15,000, but I won't have that information for this year's budget. So we almost need to wait, see what this year's revenue looks like, and then maybe in '26, we can give them that extra money. Or we take the 14,000 from their spring and fall events and roll that into the fair.
Or just cancel that and leave the 15,000
Yeah.
where they got it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How close are they to being an enterprise fund for their events?
They're not.
Okay, and I didn't think they were, but
No.
just,
And the only event they really done was it this last year they did the Halloween event, or was that 2 years ago? They did that, and they did bring some money in, but
They lost money, didn't
Yeah,
they?
yeah,
They
it
lost
didn't
money. They
break
didn't
even.
make money on that.
Yeah.
They lost money.
Yeah.
And that's the other deal is, I think they donated part of that money to somebody else, and that's what I'm saying. They don't have the authority to do that.
Mm.
So, and this can be a bigger discussion, either before the clerk's recommendation, or Jason can do what he chooses to do, and then it can be a discussion after that.
And I'd just say right now, leave the 15,000 on their entertainment. That leaves it on the fair. And the other monies, we'll have that discussion.
Okay.
And that comes under the commission, or under Scott, and not them.
So budget, if they were to have 2 events down there, it would come out of Scott's budget, not this budget?
That it would be, it's not the fair board that has that
Okay.
decision.
It'd come out of this budget
Okay,
still.
so do you want to leave both items?
Take out the 14 and leave the 15 in
Well,
entertainment.
what if we took out the 14 but put it under Scott's budget as a Downey events?
Same either way, right?
Yeah, it's
Really?
gonna be property taxes regardless. And honestly, I'm not sure the fair budget should be levied for the fair. And I don't know that it's appropriate to levy $14,000 for a spring and fall event. I would need clarification from legal on that.
Well, I would
Or at
agree,
least
I would
to read
agree
the
with that just
statute.
on the first blush.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the statute's very specific for the purposes of putting on a fair.
Yeah,
Spring and a fall event is not putting on a fair.
and so
So,
maybe that 14
basi-
should be moved. But then you might want to discuss with Scott if he wants to facilitate 2 events down there with them. I mean, just have the discussion, bigger discussion of,
And in my discussions with them and with Scott, that's just like ropings and everything else. Scott's overbooked up here. And so he'd like to use that facility down there to send
Nice.
people down that way. And that's where actually Jamie and Alex should run that,
Mm-hmm.
as they're the director down there.
That's why, to me, it sends a message that that's how we want it to operate if we move it out of fair stuff to a line item with Scott. And I realize it's,
Yeah.
semantics, but I think it sends that message.
but we could call it Downey Events.
Yeah.
And then that might also help, oops, that might also help that discussion of, hey, let's spread these events between Pocatello and Downey, which Downey should love, the city, because that will
Right.
boost some sales for the gas stations and things like that. It also utilizes those 2 facilities a little bit more, which is a benefit to the county because,
So at this point in time, we would have to strike that 15,000 based on our feeling that it is not, we can't use
Yeah.
fair dollars for that.
Right.
But we create the line item with the discussion to maybe come back and fund it with something,
yeah.
but out of a different.
Yeah.
We would
different
just
fund.
need to, that's gonna, just so that you guys are aware, we will have to, if we're gonna break the things that way, when they have events in Downey, we're gonna have to relook at the revenue that comes in.
What did you
because
say? Have to?
We're gonna have to break out, we're gonna have to look at the revenue. So
Oh,
right
right.
now, when they rent out the arena down there, that money goes into the fair exhibit budget. Maybe that money should go into the fair maintenance budget to help maintain that arena. And then if they have structured events beyond that, that money would go to the event center and it would be labeled Downey revenue. So we might have to look bigger picture.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm catching where you're going, and I think we do need to have a discussion with the Fair Board and Scott to say, for transparency, for separation,
And statutory authority.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me relook at how all that's gonna work, put it down in writing, and then when we have that meeting, hopefully that will be more clear to them so that they know what goes where, and that we're not taking from them.
Correct.
But if it's gonna be a structured, or if it's just gonna be renting buildings and things like that, we go to fair maintenance revenue, so that they keep it to help fund that, but events need to be, the revenue follows the event.
Well, and we've realized, because we're spending a lot of ARPA dollars down there right now, that we haven't maintained that facility. And that's why these events should fund that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Um,
Good discussion.
Those are all the items that are recurring. And then I didn't put in here items like critical equipment for sheriff and jail, court marshals. I didn't put in some of Kyle's, just because those are regular maintenance items that we'll just have to fund as revenues allow. Those will kind of fall in here, but they'll get a little bit overwhelming on that. Are there any one-time projects that you want to talk about more, that you have feelings for, against?
Well, I
or-
can't remember what the space savers are for the,
Basically, it's display for the historicals items. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up. We can potentially use county centennial money to fund that, not general fund reserves. When we sell our historical books, that's where that revenue goes to. We've used that in the past, and I think statutorily it's appropriate that we can use that revenue that comes in. I don't know how much money's in there. We've used it in the past and paid, 12,000 here, 12,000 there.
Let's do that.
Okay,
And the scale house, we have a meeting
Thursday.
on that, so that'll give us a little
yep,
better
that's what we thought too.
thought
I'll watch
there.
that meeting and see what I've got a JFOA webinar that time, but I'll watch it and
Okay.
see or you can let me know
Yeah,
how to
I'll
do
let
that. The last item on here doesn't have a dollar amount, but we've talked about through the ARPA discussions, trying to throw some reserve dollars somewhere for one-time overages that may happen with some of these ARPA projects, just to ensure that they can still get done. So, dollar amount
What do you-
estimates
What do you think we'll have?
for reserves?
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably do 500,000. I mean, it would be earmarked for those projects, and we could potentially put it in PILT if we don't need to put any of these in there. I feel strongly that we need to have something there so that so far most of our projects are coming in under a little bit, but all it's gonna take is one project that just,
It gets blown out.
Well,
yeah.
and like I told you the other day, they came in and told me that I was $1 million off on Downey. I said, no, I'm still $1 million, and I have that meeting Wednesday,
Mhm.
tomorrow, I think.
Well,
So,
and-
but
Build
we're-
$1 million building,
we're
that's
not-
what we've got.
We're not going over. I mean, like I said,
Right.
100,000 or something. That's why we're not putting in the sheds right now, because we have that
Discrepancy.
workable, but
Well, but-
not double.
And I'm thinking there's projects that we can adjust the scope for, like fairground buildings, that we can adjust scope to fit with
Yeah.
the dollars they have. But there's like 6th Street. What if by some, and that's probably not a great example, but what if we've got, $1,000,003 budget, or $1,021,255 budgeted? What if it comes in at $1,000,002 because as they're doing the road, they find water lines or something that just is unanticipated as part of the project that we have to do, that we can't change the scope.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking for these dollars, just so
I'm okay
that,
with that, because I also don't want to have to shortchange the facility up at the event center if something
Mhm.
goes that direction. So I would, if you're comfortable with 500,000,
I just threw that out.
Well, we'll have to look at the landfill reserves, right?
Yeah, for those.
And then,
Um,
look at the regular.
Yeah, and these would be for projects outside of landfill.
so,
You
yeah.
know, we could potentially use landfill, but,
If you want to come up with a number you're comfortable with,
okay.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so we can just provide that through the clerks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
And my thought was we would just put that in, like, either county operations or we can maybe do some from PIL. I don't know what, depending on the dollar amount, but we'll just put a lump sum, and then as those dollars are needed, the board will be requested, and for transparency purposes, requested to use and identified at that point. Okay. Any other items on B that I didn't hit? Jason? Good?
No, that's good.
Okay. Now for a budget, I just identified the 5 new positions that were requested. The code enforcement position, it was never really decided where or the dollar amount. So that's the question marks.
And I, after talking to Tony and stuff like that, I think it probably goes underneath, if anything, it goes underneath Hal.
And I think it's something that, based on what Tony had said, it's something that we don't really need. And with all the other asks that are going to be difficult, I mean, he said, if you're, okay, Hal, if you're having trouble with somebody, call us and we'll go out. But it's 11 times. It's 11 times in a year. It's not a big deal. Have a deputy go with them for that push.
Yeah, but the other part of that was, there's a lot going on that we're not even talking to people on. I mean, lava, Downey area, a lot of people coming in, building, doing stuff that they just ignore. And that's where I wonder if the position could pay for itself by recouping and making people pay their fines, or, you know, it's like the 23 million that you talked about.
But-
Is there, do we have that much out there? Do we not know that? And Hal doesn't have the personnel to put on that, to do it at this time.
Do we want to start with a full-time position, or can we start with a part-time position and then reevaluate the need 6 months, you know, when we're doing budget again, and then be like, wow, that person is extremely busy, let's have them do that. Just discussion.
Yeah, and
And if Hal has extra duties for him, then we need to know what those are if you want it to be full-time, because then those duties are gonna dictate the grade. And so,
Yeah.
and we really need all that information before we can even think to put it in the clerk's recommendation, because I can't put something without a pay in a line item.
yeah,
I mean, I can, but it's not gonna get funded.
yeah. So, I don't know, I have mixed feelings, because like I said,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of
You're right.
conversations where,
Could be.
how do we enforce these things? How do we,
Then the other question is our prosecutor willing to prosecute if we go out and write the citation? Or am I not understanding the process of how that would work with the code enforcement officer?
that's,
Valid, maybe Nancy would have input on that, I don't know. At least what the process is.
Should,
Okay,
if we have a way for giving a ticket, so.
okay. But that's the thing, I don't know if, you'd have to have an ordinance for
Mhm.
Tony to cite the ticket, right?
Right.
and there is, I mean,
Okay.
already, but all we do is send out notices. And then, like I say, also, I've received so many calls this year on weeds.
I think on Dyer's Road, we go back to the program that we pay money for people to go pull the weeds and bring it in. That, I think that was it did. I mean,
And you just have to accept some of the stuff that comes with that program, and just, I think the benefit outweighs.
I
Yeah.
agree.
and I can't remember, I can look back at when we used to do that program and see if we budgeted a lump sum dollar amount, because Kyle wasn't here at that time, I don't think.
Caribou County does it still.
Do they?
And we did it for the longest
I'll
time.
reach out. and-
Christie, do they still file liens for going in and taking care of people's weeds?
I
I know
don't,
they used to.
I don't know. I don't know that that's been a focus lately. They've kind of turned the focus to just spraying weeds on roadsides
They
and
may not
county
know
property.
about it,
Right.
because that was
Before
these
them, too.
people days.
Well, they
that
used to send out the letter.
Send a letter, if they don't
and
take care of
threaten.
it, we go do it, and then put a lien on their property.
And then charge them.
I can try to get with, it looks like Kyle's out this week because I just got a, out of office. But I can also look and see what, like, say we throw 20,000 in and you, because you did the program, so
Yeah.
you could tell them how the process went, and then I could try to remember.
How much we budgeted.
Yeah.
Well, that, and I've talked to a few people too on this, and they said Caribou County has clear plastic bags. And that's the problem that we had, is people were putting rocks and stuff in their bags and coming across the scale. And so we was paying for rocks instead of paying for the weeds. And so that frustrated them. But when I talked to Caribou County, they had clear plastic bags. Some of the Marsh Valley athletes, the groups, still go over to Caribou County now.
I
And
know when my
Pull.
boys were in high school, both of them went and pulled, and that was part of Century's athletic
Right.
program.
No, it's a good program.
It really
And
is.
so,
Again,
why not?
I think it's worth, the good outweighs the bad that comes with it.
Okay.
So maybe we pay for some rocks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Life goes on.
Well, and even at that, if, I remember in the years that we did it, if you get on it early enough and sign up early enough, you don't even have to bring them in. You just get paid per acre that you do, that you get assigned an area, and basically it would be like Kyle would say, okay, here's your area, and GIS creates a map and gives it to you. So we would walk out there with a little printed map, and it says, once we are done with this area, you take it in and you take pictures and take it in, and they pay you your whatever amount of money that area paid.
That's pretty slight.
If you do it early enough.
Right.
But then, once it goes late and you have to bag them, then you would have to bring them in and weigh them.
And you got checks, right?
Yeah, we'd get checks.
Okay. I thought we processed them out of our office, but.
Yeah, when Annie and I were 19 and married, that's how we paid for our vacations.
Okay. So maybe we can, through the clerk's process, we can work with Noxious Weed and see if we can get some of that put in. That might help take care of, at least the Dyer's Wood part.
Mhm.
You guys probably need to follow up on the liens, but maybe that would help at least some on the code enforcement.
And that's the other part, is Kathy doesn't have personnel to write out all the letters and all that kind of stuff
Full-time person.
right now either. I mean, that's,
Yeah,
each one of our departments, we're down to bare bones.
yeah.
Noxious Weed has 2 staff members.
What's that?
Noxious Weed has
They're,
2 staff members.
but they're all out spraying.
But they could coordinate, if it's early enough and they're not spraying yet, they could coordinate the Dyer's Wood program.
But
And
then they have to go drive the whole county to see where the locations are, and then write the letters, and then mail the letters out, and then
Okay.
follow up. I mean,
Maybe we,
there's a lot to it.
maybe we split, the position did used to be split between Noxious Weed and Planning. I don't know, I think this is just, we need to do some more research on this to see truly what that person needs to do.
And I agree
so that
with
we
that.
can evaluate the grade and then place them.
Well, part of me, I liked your suggestion of doing it part-time, but I wonder if maybe we budget for a part year, and for the first half of the year, we work with Tony and have one of his sheriff's deputies act as that, so we can test the model and see how many tickets we write, what kind of revenue we would bring in. Then at the 6-month mark, we come back in and Tony says, I can't do this anymore, it's taking too much time. Or we can't do the Dyer's Wood because that's not something we want the deputy doing. Okay.
And actually, Tony was against
Tony doesn't want it to be a deputy.
a deputy doing it.
Okay.
He says my deputies can go out with somebody else that,
But I guess that's my point. If Hal and his crew see those things out there and they do a focus thing like, okay, we know we're going to need to go do these 3 things. Sheriff, give me a deputy for this day. We're going to go write these 3 tickets today. And change the process a little bit. Give us 6 months to test it, see what the real need is, what the potential revenue is. And we budget for a 6-month part-time.
why don't we do that? Why don't we start with the 6-month and
So do a part-time?
code enforcement?
Okay.
I guess, would we follow after the elections the way that they do it a little bit?
Oh, you
Oh,
mean
yeah.
do a split position?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You come and work when you.
Yeah, so they're the 39 hours. Like
Oh.
our
They'd be
temps.
seasonal.
Yeah,
Okay. So they'd be 5 months,
yeah, and then take a month off.
120 hours.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do
so
something like that and
10.
see if, how, well, okay, got a frown there.
The only reason I'm frowning is because to get somebody to do this job temp, to work for 5 months with no guaranteed employment beyond that, you might have we have a hard time getting noxious weed sprayers, temporary employees.
What I was wondering is a retiree
There we go.
Yeah.
coming in, an officer or somebody
There we
that
go.
used to work
Yep.
up at the landfill or
Yeah.
that is
That's-
used to this kind of
Or even a
stuff.
deputy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Okay, okay, that works. If we can,
I mean,
Yeah.
if that's, we try it, they'd have,
any ideas what grade? You want me to see what we used to have that
Yeah, let's
position at?
look at it and see.
Okay. Past position. And then I'll see if it still fits within the grouping that was there before. Because Richard I shouldn't say that name. There was an individual that worked at planning and zoning that moved to that position forever ago. And I can see what that individual was, or there was one other person that I think did that I can see. Okay, I'll look and see what we can do with that.
So on this, like paying for the Dyer's Road, where would we fund that out of?
It would probably be property tax dollars. In noxious weed. That's where we paid for it before.
And that's where I was wondering, like reserve or whatever, because it is,
We could-
it is,
The
but it
one-time
isn't.
program.
It's a 1 year, we wouldn't have to do it year after year.
Yeah, I just gotta see if they have the reserves.
And
They may
that's
not.
all I'm saying.
But we could
Yeah.
use PILT or something like that too.
Oh, yeah, we could. We could.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll find some one-time monies.
Something that isn't guaranteed.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
don't have to do the program next year, it's this year.
Because we're gonna do a trial
Yeah.
and see if it works. Okay, I'll find some one-time monies.
Yeah.
Okay. The mosquito, full-time position. That is currently graded at an 8. The department is requesting to move it to a 9, but that's a new position that they're wanting.
They have to be licensed now. That was the new deal that just come out. And we cannot send them out. Before, they could, if they was on county property, they were okay not being licensed. But now they have to be licensed too. And that was the reasoning behind
Hmm.
when you try to get somebody licensed.
Okay. And
Keep them.
in the past, we had, I don't remember if when that department first started, we had 2 positions, and if they just weren't kept busy or how that worked. But depending on, well, we'll just start with the position, not the pay. So landfill wants a new landfill operations clerk to fill in for basically when people are sick, and there is a current employee that fills in for that. We can maybe talk about that a little bit more in executive session.
Okay.
The sheriff wants a lieutenant court security, and D6 wants a new treatment counselor. As far as D6 goes, I'll look and see if the revenue allows for the position, and if it does, it's now an enterprise fund. It will potentially cause some extra burden to health insurance, just simply because we never know what one person costs.
Yeah.
You don't know what if somebody's going to be healthy or not.
It's family.
So those are the new positions. Grade adjustments that came in.
Before we go down there, Aaron replied, they're thinking January on the McCammon
Completion?
Fire Station.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll add that to my ARPA sheet too. Grade adjustments that came in from departments. The assessor would like the motor vehicle tax to be a grade 6 from a 5. The treasurer has requested her key position, or her deputy treasurers be a grade 6 from a 5. Road and Bridge has asked for their equipment operators to be reclassified. Currently, they have regular equipment operators and seniors. They want to change that to a 1, 2, and 3. The non-CDL people would go from a grade 8 to a 9. The CDL equipment operators would go from an 8 to a 10, and the senior operators would go from a 9 to an 11. So basically 2 grade differences for all of those. This does not address comparable positions of landfill operators or Scott's operators at his facility. So we can talk about those more later. I'll just hit high level. Prosecutors, of course, came in with adjusting both attorneys and staff and moving them to their own salary table from the county schedule, which would create 3 different salary tables for our office to budget from, which, to be on the record, would be a nightmare for myself. Noxious weed wants their noxious weed operator to go from an 8 to a 10.
And that's the same situation. They have to be licensed now too.
But they're thinking more of the CDL factor of why they want them to go to a 10.
Right. 'Cause
Is
CDLs
also-
are expensive right now.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about that more? Or do we want to wait and talk about that differently?
What's that?
Any of these?
Those positions in executive session, you mean?
Yeah.
Or, let's just get to the end, I think.
Okay.
to an executive session and bounce back.
Okay. Promotions that have been discussed, we have an employee in the clerk of the court that is doing judicial assistant work, but is only classified as a senior admin assistant. That came to our attention, that would move that person from a 6 to a 9. Road and Bridge.
I have no problem with that one, after listening to that conversation.
She's just been inappropriately paid.
Yeah.
The shop
Well,
super.
we had one a year ago that
Mhm.
was down in recording or whatever, that we corrected.
Oh, yeah, archives.
Mhm.
Archives, yeah.
Road and Bridge would like their shop supervisor. When we reclassified the mechanics, that position was not changed. I don't remember it being an oversight. The department says it's an oversight. They want that position to go from a 13 to a 14.
And that one's Matthew talked about too, right? And wasn't that the position?
Yeah, but can we
That-
talk about that in executive session as well?
Okay,
Because, yeah.
okay.
And then Road and Bridge has 2 different mechanics that are currently grade 10s, and they want to reclassify one to an 11 and one to a 12, which would be a mechanic 2 and 3 accordingly. And we can talk about that because that'll be employee specific in executive session. Other generalized payroll items, juvenile probation wants their POs to be treated like law enforcement when they pass post and have 1 year of service, that they get a step increase. If we do that, I think we need to talk to Ebby and see if adult probation needs to be treated the same way. So, any
Yeah.
feelings?
They're different worlds to me,
Okay.
honestly. I mean,
What are different worlds?
the number of clients at the jail compared to the number of clients at juvenile, and the number of people that probation deal with. I don't think we're talking the same. I mean, the jail and sheriffs are on a different pay scale. And everybody wants to,
But I disagree that they're different. I mean, that's like saying that the operators on Road and Bridge are different than the operators at the landfill. They're operating different pieces of equipment, but they're not operating something that everybody off the street can go do.
And it is the certification that's required for the job. So that might be the difference, is we just need to look at the job description and say, and I'm assuming, I mean, Matt's not gonna tell us differently. What he's telling us is these positions, probation officers need to be certified and pass post within a time frame, which is the requirement of law enforcement. If you're a patrol deputy, you have to pass patrol post in order to do your job. If you don't pass post, you literally get demoted
are they the
or
same
fired.
post?
They're their own versions of post.
But it's their own version, so they've
jail
got to meet a
post and-
standard.
Jail post and patrol
Yeah.
post are different. But literally, those
Well-
employees cannot do their job if they don't pass post. So maybe that's a question we ask Matt is,
Well,
if
The
your
number of weeks
employees.
that they go to post, each one, and what they do. I
Yeah.
just, like I say, there is an equality in everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's just a discussion.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in executive session later.
But I think there is a key. We ask Matt on probation officers, if they don't pass post, do they lose their job? Is this mandatory? Because if it's mandatory, that changes the discussion a little bit.
Does.
So, but like I said, we wanted to point out that adult probation didn't make that request. So in the past, we've normally treated the two departments as somewhat equals in how they do things. The easy things on payroll is for FY25, well, I say easy, but I'm not sure if employees will like this. Due to the payroll calendar, salary approval forms will not be effective on 10/1 like normal. They'll be effective on 10/25, or 10/5.
Okay, that would make them mad.
FY25,
Yeah.
FY25. So 10/5, but that is just, that's just the structure of the pay calendar. And then last year, you guys talked about not wanting to sign each salary approval form. So we worked with Adam, and if we can get your signatures stamped on those forms, the only ones we would do that with are the ones that would be the equivalent of what was passed through budget. So you guys would essentially approve them through budget.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't have to physically sign them all. But the departments
It
will.
would be the original
Yes. Yes.
annual salary rate approval form, not the ones
Right.
that we
Right.
signed.
Not
Yes.
the ones that are ongoing.
Right, and if there were any,
It's the big stack.
yeah, if there were any tweaks through, we would have you sign them. The departments will still sign them because they are verifying that those are correct.
Yeah.
So there would still be a check of payroll, just not, so anyways,
Okay, I'm good with that.
we have time to go through.
The other thing that I don't see on here was on-call for the landfill.
The differential. I forgot to put that on here, sorry. The shift differential.
And on-call, because they don't do on-call right now.
That's right.
Right.
And
I'm sorry, I
That's
missed
right,
that.
yep.
Okay.
Oh,
I missed it too.
and I told them they had to get that this year on the budget, because they come to me mid-year and want to start
Yep.
talking about it.
Which, thank you for
Yeah.
holding a standard on that. Jeff, do you want to take that next?
Yeah, I can talk about it real quick. And again, on the record, I want to thank the committee for working on this. We've been working on it for 6 months, and I think we've come to a pretty good solution that everybody on the committee felt good about pushing forward. And so our priority is this year to reduce our steps move the salary table down to 5 steps instead of the current level of where we're at 10. And so and we had a really good discussion yesterday about whether we front load that because the steps aren't all equal, or if we put them on the back end. And I think as a general rule, we all felt leaving it on the back end is probably the better way to go to encourage longevity. So, and do you want to speak to that real quick?
Was it just the salary table basically wouldn't have minimum through 5 or 10 anymore? It would be step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Step 1 to step 2 would be 3%, 2 to 3 would be 3%, 3 to 4 would be 4%, 4 to 5 would be 5%. And then that would equal 15%. Currently, we're at 14 out from minimum to 10. So if you were at market, you still would get a little bit of a bump just putting you on the new table.
So in addition to that, this year, that would result in a rough number of about 125,000-ish is what it would cost to make that salary table adjustment across the board.
Just salaries.
So everybody would get something. Some people might get
Well,
a small amount.
anybody on the schedule would get something.
Okay, thank you. So some people might get a very small amount, others might get a little bit larger amount, but everybody would get something based on adjusting the table. Then Commissioner Mosers talked about the 3% COLA, which the group felt that the salary table adjustment and the 3% COLA this year was a fantastic step that moved us in a good direction. And then the last thing that we talked about, because originally we talked about condensing that table down and giving managers the ability to move people up on the table after 90 days. But Christy brought up a good point that that's committing, it made it tough budget-wise because then we were committing future funds for that. So then we threw out the idea of what if we gave each department a 1%, I don't know what the term would be, but a recruiting and retention fund that they could use. So rather than bring somebody in and say, okay, after 90 days, we're going to bump you up from a grade 1 to a grade 2 or 3, we're going to use some of our recruiting and retention fund and give you a one-time bonus, like a hiring bonus. And then if there's money left over at the end of the year, then they can use what's left in that fund to give out retention bonuses to staff. So again, we're not creating an ongoing liability from a salary standpoint, but we're giving the manager some flexibility to recruit and reward their staff as they see fit.
And that 1% is 1% of their department
1%.
salary budget.
Correct. And that was a number that we threw out yesterday. Christy hasn't had time to look at that and see what the actual implications of that are. But we felt like that was at least a place to start and begin the discussion today.
And it'd be one-time monies. So if we use, salaries are roughly 21 million. So it'd be like 210,000. But I did put, and we can do this, we can do a quick follow-up meeting after you guys do this opening.
Yeah.
I did put lines by priority so that we could kind of vote and see where I need to focus my efforts, because if we do a 3% COLA and make that the priority, then we can't, and say we can't fund moving the table to 5, then I don't want to do all the work on a table for 5 with a 3% if we're gonna end up going back to the 10. So I would really love to have what my focus needs to be so that I'm not doing my spreadsheet, which is
5 times.
this, multiple times. But like I said, we could do that after.
Well, everybody knows where I'm at.
Yeah,
My number one priority is A budget at 3%, then it would be B budget, and then it would be capital.
okay, what about steps? We haven't talked steps. Is it COLA and steps?
We need to have a talk about steps, because
Well, to me, the table adjustment takes care of the steps discussion.
Okay, so we would do a 3% and 5 steps. I mean, move the table.
The table.
And I worry about, because funding the, going down to the 5 steps, I like changing it, but the problem becomes funding steps. And I think that's where we have fallen short in the decades past, not giving steps, only giving COLAs.
Correct.
And so if it becomes too hard to fund those, so I know it's been thrown out a little bit, is it a 5 or is it a 7 step? And 7's a little easier to fund, which is why we went to 10 in the first place, plus the minimum. So I think there's a further discussion there, and I like it, but just,
well, I think we need to set up, and everybody understand what the steps actually are and how they work. Because I don't think that, like you said, we've not followed it. And so it doesn't do any good to go from 10 to 5, or doesn't do, if we don't do something with it.
Right.
We gotta make that a policy and follow it.
Well, and that's the discussion we had as a salary committee is, we do fine for a while, and then the inevitable change in commissioners, and depending on the commission that are sitting at the time, the priority should be steps, but if we can't fund a COLA and steps, then elected officials only receive raises if you do a COLA. And so it becomes a little difficult for governing bodies to justify raises when they think they need one, not just the employees.
that makes sense.
And that's like, in years past, B has always been the priority. I mean, we fund B.
Mhm.
And I think, no, we fund A, and then we evaluate B, and then we evaluate C.
Yeah.
And I agree.
That's what needs to happen.
And we have asked departments to make cuts to fund raises before,
Uh-huh.
and it's amazing it happens.
And that's what I think that we need to go back and make that a process that we follow.
And to the steps issue, Jason, I don't disagree with you at all. And our thought process with going down to 5 is, again, it goes back to, everybody said you should be fully proficient at your job in 5 years, so it helps you get to that faster.
Right.
But we did talk about that at length, about funding it and the issues with funding it, so we were aware of that, but we hope
Right.
that.
I 100% agree with you. I feel like, really, the mentality needs to shift to a job pays what it pays. And if you get to
Correct.
that step 5, you're proficient at your job, and that's what it pays.
Correct.
Other than COLAs.
Correct.
So that's,
That was our rationale.
yeah. It just is, if we can't afford to ever get that person to that step 5 because it's a 5% increase at the end. But I guess that doesn't happen to every person every year. It's
Right.
just a handful of people will be getting that big bump in the 5th year.
True.